You want to play games with lies? Then don't forget who learned to count the losses first.
The Riverside Inn's dining room buzzed with the kind of fake politeness that comes with expensive wine and family obligations. I sat at the head of the mahogany table, still wearing my work clothes. Navy Dickies and steel-toed boots that had seen better days. The contrast wasn't lost on anyone, especially my father-in-law Franklin Waters, who kept casting disapproving glances my way like I was something he'd scraped off his Italian leather loafers. "Smith, really?" Emily whispered through clenched teeth, her manicured fingers gripping her wine glass. "You couldn't have changed?" I looked down at my clothes. They were clean, pressed even. But in this room full of lawyers, doctors, and old money, I might as well have been wearing a neon sign that read, "Blue-collar trash." The irony wasn't lost on me, but I kept my mouth shut. For now. Franklin cleared his throat, commanding attention like he always did. At 60, he still carried himself like the corporate lawyer he'd been before retirement, all silver hair and expensive suits. "Well, since we're all here," he began, his voice carrying that particular New England accent that screamed privilege, "I thought this would be a good time to discuss Emily's future. Her salon is doing wonderfully, of course, but she deserves better than—" He gestured vaguely in my direction. "Better than what, Franklin?" I asked, keeping my voice level. "Well, Smith, let's be honest. You're an HVAC repairman. There's nothing wrong with honest work, but Emily has ambitions. She needs a partner who can match her drive, her sophistication, someone who understands business at a higher level." The table went quiet. Emily's cousin Margaret shifted uncomfortably. Her brother David, a partner at some downtown law firm, nodded approvingly. Emily just stared at her plate, saying nothing. Not defending me, not telling her father to back off, nothing. "I see," I said, cutting into my turkey with deliberate precision. "So what you're saying is that Emily married beneath herself." "I'm saying she has potential that's being limited." Franklin's smile was razor thin. "Take this restaurant, for instance. The owner, James Morrison, went to Harvard Business School, built this place from nothing into the premier dining establishment in 3 counties. That's vision, Smith. That's what I'm talking about." I nodded slowly, chewing my food. The turkey was good, moist, perfectly seasoned. The kind of meal you could only get when everything was working properly. The ovens, the refrigeration, the ventilation system that kept the kitchen from turning into a sauna. All of it humming along perfectly because someone who knew what they were doing had installed it right. "You know what, Franklin? You're absolutely right about vision." I set down my fork and looked around the table. James Morrison does have vision. That's why he called Turner Climate Solutions 3 months ago when his old system died right before the fall season. Franklin's eyebrows knitted together. "Turner Climate Solutions?" "My company." I pulled out my phone and scrolled to a photo. See, when you're trying to keep a 5,000 square foot restaurant at the perfect temperature while running industrial ovens that put out enough heat to melt steel, you don't call just any HVAC guy. You call the best. I showed him the picture. Me shaking hands with James Morrison in front of a massive commercial unit bearing the Turner Climate Solutions logo. $60,000 installation, custom ductwork, zone controls, the works. James and I grabbed beers afterward. Nice guy. Mentioned he knew the Waters family. The color drained from Franklin's face. David's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. Margaret actually smiled, the first genuine expression I'd seen from her all night. "But here's the thing about vision, Franklin," I continued, my voice still conversational but carrying more weight now. "It's not just about seeing what's possible, it's about seeing what's already there, like how Turner Climate Solutions has installations in 47 states, or how we just landed the contract for the new Boston Medical Center expansion. $12 million, by the way." Emily was staring at me now, her face unreadable. I'd never told her the full scope of the business. She knew I did well, but she'd never asked for details, and I'd never volunteered them. Why would I? She'd made it clear from day one that she wasn't interested in shop talk. 12 million? David's voice cracked slightly. Give or take. The beauty of starting from nothing, David, is that every step up feels earned. Every contract, every expansion, every employee, it all means something because you built it with your own hands. I looked directly at Franklin. Of course, someone who inherited his position at Daddy's law firm might not understand that concept. The silence stretched like a taut wire. Franklin's face had gone from pale to red, his jaw working soundlessly. Finally, he managed to speak. I had no idea. Of course you didn't. You never asked. I stood up, dropping my napkin on my plate. You just assumed. Because I wear work boots and get my hands dirty, I must be some kind of failure. Someone your daughter settled for. I looked around the table one more time, taking in the shocked faces, the half-eaten meals, the expensive wine that suddenly tasted like vinegar in everyone's mouth. Enjoy your dinner, folks. It's on me. I'm sure James will understand when I explain the situation. I headed for the door, then stopped and looked back at Franklin. Oh, and Franklin, next time you want to humiliate someone at dinner, maybe do a little research first. It's what any good lawyer would do. The drive home was quiet. Emily, staring out the passenger window like the Massachusetts countryside, held the answers to all her problems. Our house, a restored colonial that we'd spent 2 years renovating, looked warm and inviting in the November darkness. Too bad the warmth was only coming from the heating system. You embarrassed him, Emily said as soon as we walked through the front door. He embarrassed himself. He's my father, Smith. And I'm your husband. Or did you forget that while you were sitting there letting him tear me apart? She spun around, her face flushed with anger. What was I supposed to do? 'Cause a scene? You were supposed to defend me. You were supposed to tell him he was out of line. You were supposed to act like you actually gave a darn about the man you married. Don't turn this around on me. You're the one who made my father look like a fool in front of the whole family. I stared at her, really looked at her for the first time in months. The woman I'd fallen in love with 8 years ago had been ambitious, sure, but she'd also been kind. She'd laughed at my jokes, supported my dreams, made me feel like I could conquer the world. This woman, this angry, entitled stranger, I didn't recognize her at all. Your father made himself look like a fool, Emily. I just gave him the rope. You should have told me about the business, about how big it really is. When? When would I have told you? During one of our conversations about your salon? Or maybe during one of your shopping trips with Linda? Or how about during one of those dinners where you complain about how boring my work stories are? She opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. We both knew I was right. Look, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. I know tonight was rough, but maybe this is good. Maybe now your family will stop treating me like some kind of charity case you picked up. It's not that simple, Smith. Why not? Because... She struggled for words, then threw up her hands. Because you still fix air conditioners. It doesn't matter how much money you make doing it. You still come home dirty. You still smell like machinery and sweat. There it was. The truth, finally out in the open. Not about the money or the success or the respect. It was about the work itself. About the fact that I got my hands dirty for a living, that I built things instead of just talking about them. I see. I nodded slowly. So what you're saying is that you're ashamed of me. I'm not ashamed. Yes, you are. You're ashamed that your husband works with his hands. You're ashamed that I didn't go to some fancy college. You're ashamed that when people ask what I do for a living, you have to say I'm an HVAC. That's not... She stopped, her face crumpling. God, Smith, I don't know anymore. I thought things would be different by now. Different how? I thought you'd move into management. Stop doing the actual work. Be more like... More like what? More like your father? More like David? She didn't answer, but she didn't need to. The silence said everything. I walked to the hall closet and pulled out my overnight bag. I'm going to stay at Ray's tonight. Give us both some time to think. Smith, wait? No, Emily, I'm done waiting. I'm done trying to be something I'm not just to make you happy. I'm done pretending that this marriage is working when we both know it isn't. I packed quickly, throwing clothes and toiletries into the bag while she stood in the doorway watching. When I was finished, I stopped in front of her one last time. For what it's worth, I'm proud of what I do. I'm proud that I built something from nothing. I'm proud that when people need help, they call me, and I'm proud that I never forgot where I came from. I shouldered the bag. I just wish my wife was proud of me too. The door closed behind me with a soft click, but it felt like a thunderclap in the November night. Ray Morrison lived in a converted garage apartment behind his mother's house, which sounds sadder than it actually was. Ray had turned the space into a bachelor pad that would make most married men weep with envy. Big screen TV, leather recliner, mini fridge stocked with good beer, and not a throw pillow in sight. "So let me get this straight," Ray said, handing me a bottle of Sam Adams. "Your wife is pissed because you're too successful? She's pissed because I'm successful at the wrong thing." I took a long pull of the beer. It was ice cold and tasted like freedom. Apparently, making millions in HVAC doesn't count if you still get your hands dirty. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard, and I once watched a guy try to jump his motorcycle over a school bus. Ray had been my best friend since high school, back when we were both just working-class kids with big dreams and bigger mouths. While I'd built my business, Ray had become a master electrician and part-time philosopher. He was also the only person who'd never treated me differently when the money started rolling in. "You know what your problem is, Smith?" "I'm sure you're going to tell me." "You married up, but you never made her marry down." I looked at him over my beer bottle. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means Emily got all the benefits of your success without ever having to understand what it cost you. She gets the nice house, the financial security, the lifestyle, but she never had to appreciate the work that made it possible." He wasn't wrong. Emily had grown up comfortable, went to private school, had her college paid for by daddy. She'd never worked a job where she came home exhausted, never worried about making rent, never had to choose between fixing the car and buying groceries. The salon was her first real business venture, and even that was bankrolled by her trust fund. "So, what do I do?" "Heck if I know. I've been single for 3 years and couldn't be happier." Ray settled into his recliner. "But if I were you, I'd figure out what you really want before you go back home." What I really wanted was for my wife to respect me, to be proud of what I'd built instead of embarrassed by how I'd built it. But as I lay on Ray's couch that night, staring at the ceiling, I started to wonder if that was even possible anymore. My phone buzzed around midnight. "Emily. I'm sorry about tonight. Can we talk?" I stared at the message for a long time before typing back, "Tomorrow. I need some space to think." "I love you." I almost wrote "I love you too" out of habit, but stopped myself. Did I still love her? Or was I just in love with the memory of who she used to be? I turned off the phone without responding. The next morning, I drove to the office to clear my head. Turner Climate Solutions occupied a converted warehouse on the outskirts of town, with the main office upstairs and the shop floor below. It was early Saturday, so the place was mostly empty, except for the weekend emergency crew. I'd started the company in this same building 12 years ago, back when it was just me in a used van. Now we had 47 employees, a fleet of trucks and contracts across the country. Every piece of equipment, every tool, every square foot of space represented hours of work, smart decisions, and calculated risks. It was my legacy, built with my own hands and brain. My office overlooked the shop floor where rows of gleaming equipment waited to be installed. Commercial units that cost more than most people's cars, custom ductwork fabricated to precise specifications, control systems that could regulate the temperature in a 50-story building. This wasn't just fixing air conditioners. This was engineering, problem-solving, creating solutions for problems most people never even knew existed. I was reviewing the Boston Medical Center blueprints when my phone rang. "Emily." "Hi," she said, her voice small. "Hi. Can you come home? I made breakfast." Emily, please, I know I screwed up last night. I want to make it right. Against my better judgment, I agreed. The house smelled like bacon and coffee when I walked in. Emily had set the dining room table with our good china, the stuff we only used for holidays and special occasions. She was wearing the blue dress I'd bought her for our anniversary, the one that made her eyes look like sapphires. "You look nice," I said. "Thank you." She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "I made your favorite, blueberry pancakes, bacon, fresh orange juice." We ate in relative silence, both of us dancing around the elephant in the room. Finally, Emily set down her fork and looked at me directly. "I talked to my father this morning." "How'd that go?" "He's embarrassed. Ashamed, actually. He had no idea about your company, about how successful you really are." She reached across the table and took my hand. "I'm proud of you, Smith. I know I don't say it enough, but I am." "Are you? Or are you just proud now that you know there's more money involved?" She flinched like I'd slapped her. "That's not fair." "Isn't it? Last night you were ashamed that I work with my hands. This morning, after you found out about the contracts and the money, suddenly you're proud. What changed, Emily?" I don't know. I guess I never really understood what you do." "You never wanted to understand. Every time I tried to tell you about a project or a new contract, you'd change the subject. You'd rather talk about anything else, the salon, your friends, what color to paint the bathroom, anything but my work. Because I thought it was boring. And now..." She was quiet for a long moment. "Now I realize I was wrong. About a lot of things." I wanted to believe her. God, how I wanted to believe that we could fix this, that last night had been some kind of wake-up call that would bring us back together. But something in her eyes, some calculation behind the apology, made me hesitate. "What about the salon?" I asked. "What about it?" "Your heating system is acting up, right? You mentioned it last week." "Oh, that. Well, I was hoping, since you're in the business and all, maybe you could take a look at it as a favor." There it was. The real reason for the fancy breakfast and the apology. She needed something. "You want me to fix your salon's heating system for free?" "It's not like that." "What's it like then?" "It's just, the system is old and getting quotes from other companies is expensive. And I thought, since you're my husband..." I stood up from the table, my appetite gone. "Let me see if I understand this correctly. You spend months being embarrassed by my work, letting your father humiliate me for what I do, making it clear that you think I'm beneath your social circle. But now that you need something fixed, suddenly it's okay for me to be an HVAC guy. Smith, please. How much would it cost to hire someone else? I don't know, maybe 3,000 or 4,000? And you thought I'd just do it for free because we're married?" "Well, yes." I nodded slowly. "Here's the thing, Emily. Turner Climate Solutions doesn't do charity work. We're a business, not a favor factory. If you want your system fixed, you can pay our standard rate like everyone else." Her face went white, then red. "You're going to charge your own wife?" "I'm going to charge a customer who happens to be married to the owner." That's ridiculous." "Is it? You just told me that my work was boring and embarrassing. You sat there last night while your father called me a failure. But now you want the benefits of being married to someone in the HVAC business?" I shook my head. "You can't have it both ways, Emily." She stood up, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "Fine, I'll hire someone else." "Good, I'm sure they'll do excellent work." "This is insane, Smith. We're married. Married people help each other." "You're right, they do. They also defend each other. They support each other. They don't let their families tear each other apart over dinner." I headed for the door. "When you figure out what kind of marriage you want, let me know." "Where are you going?" "Back to Ray's. I'll get my things later." "Smith, wait." but I was already gone. 3 days later, I was back at the office when my lawyer called. Janet Reyes had handled the legal side of Turner Climate Solutions since the beginning, and she didn't waste time on pleasantries. "Your wife filed for divorce," she said without preamble. I'd been expecting it, but hearing the words still hit like a punch to the gut. "When?" "This morning. She's asking for half of everything, the house, the business, even your personal assets." "Can she do that?" "Massachusetts is a no-fault state, so technically yes. But there are complicating factors. The business was established before your marriage, and you've kept your personal and business finances separate. That works in your favor." "What about the house?" "That's trickier. You bought it together, both names on the deed. She's got a legitimate claim there." I rubbed my temples, feeling a headache coming on. "What's our next move?" "I need you to gather all your financial records, business and personal. Bank statements, tax returns, investment portfolios, everything. And Smith, be prepared for this to get ugly. Divorce brings out the worst in people." She wasn't kidding. That afternoon, I drove past Emily's salon on my way to the bank. Through the large front windows, I could see her talking animatedly with Linda Chen, her business partner and best friend. Linda was nodding sympathetically, occasionally casting venomous looks toward the street like she could sense my presence. Linda had never liked me. From day one, she'd treated me like an interloper in Emily's life, someone who didn't understand the sophisticated world of high-end beauty services. She was the one who'd encouraged Emily to open the salon in the first place, who'd pushed her to think bigger and demand more from life. In Linda's world, success was measured by how clean your hands stayed and how many degrees hung on your wall. I parked across the street and watched them through the window. Emily was crying now, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue while Linda rubbed her shoulder. The concerned friend, offering support in Emily's time of need. It would have been touching if I didn't know Linda was probably encouraging Emily to take me for everything I was worth. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Your wife deserves better than a grease monkey. Stay away from the salon." I stared at the message, then looked back at the salon window. Linda was on her phone now, typing something. Coincidence? Probably not. I drove to Ray's place to pick up some tools I'd left there. He was in his workshop behind the garage, rebuilding the engine on a 1967 Camaro that had seen better decades. "Heard about the divorce," he said, without looking up from the carburetor he was cleaning. "Sorry, man." "How'd you hear?" Linda Chen was at Murphy's Tavern last night, telling anyone who'd listen how Emily finally came to her senses about marrying beneath her station. He set down his wrench and looked at me. "She also mentioned that Emily's got herself a new lawyer, some hotshot from Boston who specializes in taking rich husbands to the cleaners." "Great." "Guy's name is Brad Vance. Runs a gym downtown when he's not practicing law. Real piece of work, according to Tommy behind the bar." Something about that name nagged at me, but I couldn't place it. "What kind of piece of work?" "The kind that drives a $60,000 Mustang and wears suits that cost more than most people's rent. Also the kind that's been seen having lunch with your wife 3 times this week." Now I knew why the name sounded familiar. Brad Vance owned Apex Fitness, the upscale gym where Emily had started working out 6 months ago. She'd mentioned him a few times, always in the context of how professional and knowledgeable he was, how he'd helped her develop a new fitness routine. "You think there's something going on between them?" Ray shrugged. "I think your wife just filed for divorce and immediately hired a lawyer she's been having cozy lunches with. Draw your own conclusions." That night, I sat in my truck across from Apex Fitness, watching the parking lot. Emily's BMW was there, along with a red Mustang that had to belong to Brad Vance. The gym closed at 9, but it was almost 10, and both cars were still there. I felt like a private detective in some noir novel, sitting in the dark spying on my cheating wife. The only things missing were the cigarettes and the voiceover narration about how the city was full of beautiful, dangerous women who'd destroy a man for the right price. At 10:15, the gym's lights went out. A few minutes later, Emily and Brad emerged from the building. Even from a distance, I could see they were standing too close, talking too intimately. When he put his hand on her arm, she didn't pull away. They talked for another 10 minutes before getting into their respective cars. Emily drove home. Brad went in the opposite direction toward the expensive side of town where lawyers and gym owners could afford waterfront condos. I followed Emily at a distance, watching as she pulled into our driveway and went into the house that was no longer really mine. The lights came on in the kitchen, then the bedroom. Our bedroom, where she was probably calling Brad to report on her day, maybe making plans for tomorrow. My phone rang. Emily. "Hi," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "Hi. I heard you were asking around about my lawyer." "Small town. People talk." "Smith, I want you to know that this doesn't have to be complicated. We can split everything fairly and move on with our lives." "Define fairly." 50-50. The house, your business assets, retirement accounts, everything. I almost laughed. "You want half of a business you've never shown any interest in, that you've actively discouraged me from talking about, that you've been embarrassed by for years? I supported you while you built that business. You tolerated me while I built that business. There's a difference." "I was a good wife, Smith." "Were you? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you were a good wife right up until you found a lawyer who drives a nicer car than I do." Silence on the other end of the line. "I don't know what you think you know. I know you've been having lunch with Brad Vance 3 times this week. I know you hired him as your lawyer the same day you filed for divorce. I know you're at the gym until all hours working on your fitness routine. Are you spying on me? I'm protecting my interests, just like you are." "Smith, this is crazy. Brad is my lawyer, nothing more." "Then why are you calling me at 10:30 at night to tell me that?" Another silence, longer this time. "Because I don't want this to get any uglier than it has to be." Too late for that, Emily. You made sure of that when you decided to screw me over with a lawyer you're probably screwing in real life. That's a horrible thing to say, but you're not denying it. She hung up. I sat in my truck for another hour looking at the house Emily and I had renovated together. We'd stripped wallpaper, refinished floors, installed new fixtures. Every room held memories of the life we'd built together, the future we'd planned. Now it was just another asset to be divided up by lawyers and accountants. My phone buzzed with another text from the unknown number. "Stop harassing her, or you'll regret it." This time, I was ready. I screenshotted the message and forwarded it to Janet with a note. Evidence of harassment from wife's side. Probably the lawyer. 2 could play the documentation game. The divorce proceedings dragged on for 6 weeks, each day bringing new revelations about just how much Emily had grown to resent our marriage. Through depositions and financial disclosures, a picture emerged of a woman who'd been planning her exit strategy long before our Thanksgiving dinner disaster. She'd been moving money from our joint accounts into a personal account for months. Small amounts, nothing that would trigger my attention, but enough to build up a war chest. She'd also been documenting every business expense I'd charged to our joint credit card, building a case that I'd been using marital funds to subsidize Turner Climate Solutions. "It's clever," Janet admitted during one of our strategy sessions. "Sleazy, but clever. She's trying to establish that your business success came at the expense of the marriage." Can she do that? She can try, but we've got the documentation to prove otherwise. Your business accounts have been separate since day one, and you've actually been subsidizing the household expenses, not the other way around. The real bombshell came during Emily's deposition. Under oath, she admitted to the affair with Brad Vance, but claimed it had started after she'd filed for divorce. When Janet pressed for details, the timeline started falling apart. "So you're saying you hired Mr. Vance as your attorney on November 28th, but your intimate relationship didn't begin until December 15th? Janet asked. "Janet, that's correct. But according to your gym's security footage, which we've subpoenaed, you and Mr. Vance were alone in the facility after hours on November 20th, November 25th, and December 2nd. Can you explain what you were doing during those times? Emily's face went white. We were discussing my case. For 3 hours? In a gym? After closing time? Brad was helping me work through the stress of the divorce. I see, and this stress relief involved removing your wedding ring, which you can be seen placing in your purse on the November 25th footage. Game over. The final hearing was scheduled for a cold February morning. I wore my best suit, not because I cared about impressing the judge, but because I wanted Emily to see exactly what she was losing. The man she'd been embarrassed by could clean up pretty well when he wanted to. Emily sat with Brad at the plaintiff's table, both of them looking confident despite the affair revelation. Brad had managed to stay on as her lawyer despite the obvious conflict of interest, probably because Emily couldn't afford to start over with someone new. Judge Patricia Morrison, no relation to Ray despite the name, was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who'd built a reputation for cutting through divorce case Bs with surgical precision. She'd reviewed all the evidence, heard all the testimony, and was ready to render her decision. This case presents an interesting study in the evolution of a marriage, she began. We have a husband who built a successful business through hard work and intelligence, and a wife who grew to resent that success because it didn't fit her vision of what success should look like. Emily shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Mrs. Turner, you've asked this court to award you half of your husband's business assets, claiming that you supported him during the company's growth phase. However, the evidence shows that not only did you not support his business endeavors, you actively discouraged them. You've testified that you found his work boring and embarrassing, and that you wished he would move into management so he could be more like your father and brother. Your Honor, Brad interrupted, my client's personal feelings about her husband's work don't negate her legal right to marital assets. Judge Morrison fixed him with a stare that could have frozen water. Mr. Vance, you'll have your chance to speak. Right now, I'm addressing your client directly. She turned back to Emily. Mrs. Turner, you've also claimed that your husband used marital funds to subsidize his business. However, the financial records show the opposite. Mr. Turner kept his business and personal finances scrupulously separate, and in fact, contributed significantly more to household expenses than you did, despite your own successful salon business. The judge picked up another file. Which brings us to the matter of your relationship with your attorney. Mrs. Turner, you've admitted under oath to having an intimate relationship with Mr. Vance, but claim it began after you filed for divorce. The evidence suggests otherwise. Your Honor, Emily said, her voice shaking. I made a mistake. I was lonely and confused and... Mrs. Turner, adultery isn't a crime, and Massachusetts is a no-fault divorce state. However, lying under oath is perjury, and attempting to defraud your spouse of marital assets is a civil matter that could result in significant financial penalties. The courtroom was dead silent. Even the court reporter seemed to be holding her breath. Therefore, this court awards Mr. Turner full ownership of Turner Climate Solutions as it was established prior to the marriage and maintained as a separate entity throughout. Mrs. Turner will retain full ownership of her salon business. Emily's face went from white to red. As for the marital home, given Mrs. Turner's adultery and her attempt to hide marital assets, this court awards Mr. Turner a 70% stake in the property. Mrs. Turner may buy out his interest at fair market value, or the property will be sold and the proceeds divided accordingly. Your Honor, Brad said, standing up. This is highly irregular. Massachusetts law clearly states, Mr. Vance, sit down. I'm not finished. Judge Morrison's voice could have cut glass. This court is also awarding Mr. Turner his full legal costs to be paid by Mrs. Turner within 60 days. Emily was crying now, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of rage. Furthermore, the judge continued, this court is recommending that the Massachusetts Bar Association review Mr. Vance's conduct in this case. Having an intimate relationship with a client while representing them in a divorce proceeding raises serious ethical questions. Brad's confident expression evaporated. This court is adjourned. The gavel came down like a crack of thunder. Outside the courthouse, Emily cornered me on the steps. "You bastard," she hissed. "You planned this whole thing." "I planned to defend myself against a fraudulent lawsuit filed by my cheating wife. If that makes me a bastard, I can live with it." "You could have settled. We could have split everything 50-50 and moved on." "You mean I could have let you steal half of everything I built while you were screwing your lawyer on the side?" Brad appeared beside her, his hand possessively on her arm. "Turner, you got lucky in there. Don't push it." I looked at him, really looked at him for the first time. He was handsome in a generic way, with the kind of artificially perfect physique that came from spending more time in front of mirrors than most women. His suit was expensive but flashy, the kind of thing a man wore when he wanted everyone to know how much money he had. "Lucky?" I smiled. "Brad, I'm a businessman. I don't believe in luck. I believe in preparation, hard work, and knowing your opponent's weaknesses." "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I know you've been using Emily's retainer payments to make the lease on that fancy gym of yours. I know your law practice is basically broke because you spend more on clothes and cars than you make in fees. And I know that in about 3 months, when Emily can't afford to keep paying you, you're going to dump her for the next desperate housewife with a trust fund." Brad's face went purple. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Don't I? See, the thing about small towns, Brad, is that everyone knows everyone's business. Your landlord at the gym, his building's HVAC system was installed by Turner Climate Solutions. We're practically best friends now." I stepped closer, close enough that he had to look up to meet my eyes. "Here's some free advice. Emily's broke now. The legal fees, the settlement, the buyout on the house, she's got nothing left. So whatever you thought you were getting out of this relationship, you might want to recalculate." I turned to Emily. "You've got 60 days to buy me out of the house or it goes on the market. Janet will send you the paperwork." As I walked away, I could hear them starting to argue behind me. Something about money, about expectations, about who was going to pay for what. The sound of a relationship that had been built on greed and lust finally collapsing under its own weight. It was the sweetest music I'd heard in months. Spring came early that year, and with it, the final phase of my divorce from Emily. She'd managed to scrape together enough money to buy out my share of the house, though I suspected her father had helped with the financing. Franklin Waters had been conspicuously absent from the divorce proceedings, probably too embarrassed by his Thanksgiving dinner performance to show his face in court. I'd moved into a new place, a converted loft downtown that had been a textile mill in the 1800s. The exposed brick walls and original hardwood floors suited me. It was honest architecture, built by people who weren't ashamed of working with their hands. Turner Climate Solutions was thriving. The Boston Medical Center contract had led to 3 more hospital jobs, and we'd just landed the HVAC work for a new casino being built in Connecticut. I'd hired 6 more employees and was looking at opening a second location in Springfield. Emily's salon, on the other hand, was struggling. Word of the divorce and the affair had spread through town like wildfire, and apparently, many of her upscale clients didn't appreciate their beautician's messy personal life. Linda had tried to distance herself from the scandal, but guilt by association was a powerful force in a small community. I might have felt sorry for Emily if she hadn't spent the last 2 months trying to make my life miserable. It started with anonymous bad reviews of Turner Climate Solutions on every website she could find. Then there were the mysterious complaints to the Better Business Bureau, all claiming shoddy workmanship and overcharging. When that didn't work, she escalated to spreading rumors about my business practices, telling anyone who'd listen that I was a fraud who'd gotten lucky. The final straw came on a warm April evening when I returned to my loft to find my truck's tires slashed and cheater spray-painted across the windshield. I called the police, but without witnesses or security footage, there wasn't much they could do. Detective McKay, a grizzled veteran who'd known me since high school, was sympathetic but realistic. "Smith, I know it was probably your ex-wife, and you know it was probably your ex-wife, but knowing and proving are 2 different things," he said as we stood looking at my vandalized truck. Best I can do is file a report and increase patrols in this area. What if I could prove it? Then we'd have a different conversation, but be careful how you go about getting that proof. I'd hate to see you do something stupid and end up in more trouble than she is. That weekend, I had lunch with Ray at Murphy's Tavern. The place was packed with the usual crowd of construction workers, mechanics, and other folks who weren't ashamed to earn a living with their hands. It was my kind of place. Honest drinks, honest food, honest conversation. So, what's your next move? Ray asked over a plate of fish and chips. I'm thinking about just letting it go, moving on with my life. Bees. What? That's BS, and you know it. Emily's been trying to destroy your reputation for months. She cost you at least 3 jobs with her fake reviews and gossip campaign. And now she's vandalizing your property. Ray took a swig of his beer. The Smith Turner I know doesn't just roll over and take it. He was right, of course. I'd been trying to take the high road, to be the bigger person, to prove that I was better than the petty games Emily was playing. But the high road was getting expensive, both financially and personally. What do you suggest? I suggest you remind your ex-wife why it's a bad idea to mess with someone who knows where all the bodies are buried. That got my attention. What do you mean? Ray grinned. I mean, I've been doing some digging of my own. Turns out your buddy Brad Vance has been a very busy boy. He pulled out his phone and showed me a series of photos. Brad's Mustang parked outside a motel on Route 9. Brad himself walking into a room with a woman who definitely wasn't Emily. The timestamp showed the photos were taken just 3 days ago. Who's the woman? Jessica Martinez. Divorced, owns a boutique downtown, recently hired Brad to handle her custody case. Ray scrolled to another photo. This one was taken last week. Same motel, different woman. That's Sarah Chen, Linda's sister. Also recently divorced, also one of Brad's clients. I stared at the photos, pieces of a puzzle clicking into place. He's running a scam. Looks like it. Target lonely, wealthy divorcees, seduce them during the legal process, then bleed them dry with inflated fees and false promises. Ray put his phone away. Emily's just the latest mark. Does she know? I doubt it. She's probably still thinking she's special, that what they have is real love. Ray's expression turned serious. Question is, what are you going to do with this information? I thought about it for a long moment. Emily had made her choice when she decided to cheat on me, lie under oath, and then spend months trying to destroy my business. She'd declared war, and wars had casualties. I'm going to end this, I said. The plan was simple but effective. I had Ray deliver an envelope to Emily at the salon, making sure Linda was there to witness it. Inside were copies of the photos, along with a note. Thought you should know what kind of man you're dating. A friend. Then I sat back and waited. I didn't have to wait long. That evening I was at my loft reviewing blueprints for the casino job when I heard shouting from the street below. I looked out my window to see Emily's BMW screeching to a halt in front of Brad's gym. She stormed out of the car and marched inside, leaving the driver's door wide open. I couldn't hear what was being said, but I could see them through the gym's front windows. Emily was waving the photos in Brad's face, screaming at him. He was trying to calm her down, to explain, but she wasn't having it. The argument spilled out into the parking lot, where their voices carried clearly in the evening air. You bastard! Emily screamed. You lying, cheating bastard! Emily, listen to me. I gave you everything. I left my husband for you. I destroyed my marriage for you. Baby, those photos don't mean anything. Those women were just clients. Clients? Clients? Emily's voice cracked with rage and heartbreak. You were sleeping with your clients while you were sleeping with me. A small crowd had gathered on the sidewalk, drawn by the drama. I recognized several faces from around town, including Tommy Murphy, who owned the tavern. By tomorrow, everyone in a 50-mile radius would know that Emily Turner had been played for a fool by her sleazy lawyer boyfriend. Emily, calm down. We can work this out. Work this out? You used me. You made me think you loved me, that we had a future together, and all the time you were just using me for my money. That's not true. Isn't it? When's the last time you paid for dinner, Brad? When's the last time you paid for anything? I've been supporting your pathetic lifestyle for months while you were out screwing half the divorced women in town. Brad tried to grab her arm, but Emily pulled away. Don't touch me. Don't you ever touch me again. She got back in her car and peeled out of the parking lot, leaving Brad standing alone in front of his gym while a dozen people stared at him, with a mixture of amusement and disgust. I closed the window and went back to my blueprints, but I couldn't concentrate. Part of me felt vindicated. Emily had finally gotten a taste of her own medicine. But another part of me, the part that had once loved her, felt genuinely sorry for what she was going through. That lasted until I got to work the next morning and found my office windows broken and a hole spray-painted across my truck again. This time, there were witnesses. Mrs. Patterson, who lived in the apartment building across from my office, had seen Emily's BMW in the parking lot around midnight. She'd also seen a woman matching Emily's description throwing rocks at my windows. Detective McKay was less sympathetic this time. Smith, I'm going to have to arrest her. Vandalism, destruction of property, harassment. We've got enough for multiple charges. What's she looking at? Fines, community service, maybe some jail time if she's got priors. But more importantly for you, it'll put a stop to this nonsense once and for all. Emily was arrested at the salon that afternoon, led away in handcuffs while Linda and their customers watched in horror. The local newspaper ran the story on the front page. Local businesswoman arrested for vandalism in divorce dispute. The final humiliation came at Emily's sentencing hearing 2 weeks later. Judge Morrison, the same woman who'd handled our divorce, was not amused by Emily's continued antics. Mrs. Turner, she said, looking down from the bench with obvious disapproval, 6 months ago, you stood in my courtroom and lied under oath about your extramarital affair. Now you're back, having been convicted of vandalizing your ex-husband's property in a fit of childish revenge. Emily stood with her new lawyer, a public defender since Brad had been disbarred, pending an investigation into his business practices. This court sentences you to 90 days in county jail, suspended, 2 years probation, and full restitution for the damages to Mr. Turner's property. You are also hereby ordered to have no contact with Mr. Turner, his business, or his employees for the duration of your probation period. Judge Morrison leaned forward. Mrs. Turner, I'm going to give you some free advice. You've spent the last year making one bad decision after another. You cheated on a good man, lied in court, trusted a con artist, and then tried to destroy your ex-husband's livelihood out of spite. It's time to grow up and take responsibility for your choices. Emily left the courthouse that day a broken woman. Her salon was failing, her reputation was in ruins, and she was facing financial ruin. Linda had bought out her share of the business and changed the name, effectively erasing Emily from the venture she'd once been so proud of. As for Brad, he'd left town after losing his law license, owing money to half the businesses in the area. Last I heard, he was selling used cars in Florida, probably looking for his next mark. I ran into Emily one last time, about a month after the sentencing. I was leaving Murphy's Tavern when I saw her sitting alone in her car in the parking lot. She looked older, defeated, like the weight of her choices had finally caught up with her. She rolled down her window as I walked past. Smith, she said quietly. Emily. I'm leaving town, going to stay with my sister in California for a while. I nodded. Probably for the best. I want you to know, I'm sorry for all of it. The cheating, the lies, trying to hurt your business. You didn't deserve any of that. No, I didn't. You were a good husband. Better than I deserved. Tears were running down her cheeks now. I was just so angry all the time, so resentful. I thought I wanted something different, something better. I thought you were holding me back. From what? I don't know. That's the stupid part. I threw away the best thing in my life, and I don't even know why. I looked at her for a long moment. This woman I'd once loved more than anything in the world. She was still beautiful, but the beauty was hollow now, corrupted by bitterness and bad choices. "Emily," I said finally, "I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for." What if what I was looking for was right here all along? Then you should have figured that out before you threw it away. She nodded, accepting the finality of it. "Take care of yourself, Smith." "You too." She drove away, and I never saw her again. 6 months later, I got a wedding invitation in the mail. Ray Morrison was marrying Jessica Martinez, the boutique owner who'd been one of Brad's other victims. Apparently, they'd met at Murphy's Tavern when she was drowning her sorrows over being conned by a sleazy lawyer, and Ray had offered her a sympathetic ear and a strong shoulder to cry on. The wedding was beautiful, held in the garden behind Ray's mother's house. Jessica was radiant in a simple white dress, and Ray looked happier than I'd ever seen him. During his speech at the reception, he thanked me for introducing him to the love of his life. "If Smith hadn't exposed that scumbag Brad Vance," he said, raising his beer bottle, "Jessica and I might never have found each other." The crowd laughed and applauded. I raised my own bottle in response, thinking about the strange ways life worked out. Emily's betrayal had led to my freedom. Brad's con game had led to Ray's happiness. And my revenge had cleared the way for all of us to find better lives. As I drove home that night, I passed the building that used to house Emily's salon. It was a coffee shop now, bustling with customers and full of life. The old Emily would have been devastated to see her baby transformed into something so ordinary. But maybe ordinary wasn't such a bad thing. Maybe ordinary was honest, real, unpretentious. Maybe ordinary was exactly what I'd been looking for all along. Turner Climate Solutions continued to grow. We opened that second location in Springfield, then a third in Hartford. I hired more employees, took on bigger projects, built relationships with clients who respected the work I did and the way I did it. I never remarried. I dated occasionally, but I was in no hurry to complicate my life again. I'd learned the hard way that it was better to be alone than to be with someone who didn't appreciate what you had to offer. On quiet evenings, sitting in my loft with a good book and a cold beer, I sometimes thought about Emily. I wondered if she'd found what she was looking for in California, if she'd learned anything from the wreckage of our marriage, if she ever thought about the life we could have had together. But those thoughts came less frequently as time went on. The past was the past, and I had a future to build. A future where I didn't have to apologize for who I was or what I did for a living. A future where success was measured by the quality of my work and the respect of my peers, not by how clean my hands stayed or how many degrees hung on my wall. It was a good future. An honest future. The kind of future a man could build with his own hands and be proud of. And in the end, that was all I'd ever really wanted.